All right, Mr. Hanlon, on R24, please.
R24 is an authorization for an engagement for professional services with McMahon Associates for $91,000 for engineering design services for work related to intersection and traffic improvements along the coast.
Okay, turn it over to the administration.
Good evening. The city issued RFP 2017-28 for municipal engineer in 2018. The department received approval from PennDOT to use the engineer selected through that process for this project.
Okay, any questions from council? This wasn't a bid, this was an approval of PennDOT.
Correct. So the vendor was already selected through an RFP process back in 2018. And then PennDOT approved for us to use the same engineer to continue the project this year.
Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just two quick questions, and these would be more for Mr. Messinger. Where is the work that they have currently either done or are doing for us? And then the second part of that is, what would be the timeline for this project once it starts?
They were currently working on the downtown traffic adaptive system that we already have in place. And this is the same work then that is scheduled to be done on Lehigh Street with grant monies that we already have secured. That'll be from 31st down to like Lehigh and Martin Luther King, that whole stretch there. And that's a project that we're hoping to get done actually this year.
Okay, and this is just for all of the Lehigh Street section. It doesn't include anything with St. John to the Ward Street Bridge, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to verify that because there was a question from someone in the neighborhood about that, so I wanted to verify that. So, excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Messinger. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Anybody else from council?
Quick question.
Mr. Green.
In regards to the match that we have to provide, 193,000,
Yes.
594, how did that come about? Is it a percentage of the total?
Yes. Yes, that was the match necessary for us to do this project.
Okay, so when they issue it, they say you gotta match this amount or this percentage.
When we actually even go to apply for it, they let us know what the match requirements would be, yes.
And this money was encumbered already for this?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Anybody else from council? Anybody from the public? Seeing nobody, Mr. Hanlon.
R24, Ms. Zappa.
Yes.
Mr. Greedy.
Yes.
Mr. Henricks.
Yes.
Moda.
Yes.
Robinson.
Yes.
Suzuko.
Yes.
McLean.
Yes.
Okay, that's 78.
Thank you very much. R25, please.
R25 is an authorization for a change order in the amount of $114,235 with Michael Baker International for the development of plans according to PennDOT procedures and for additional construction and design plans for the Greenway Trail project. The initial contract started in July 2017 and now extends to July 2020. The original contract was for $188,871.50. New total would be $303,107.
Okay, I'll turn it over to the administration with the caveat that I have a real problem with change orders, so.
Yes, we know.
Especially a $114,000 change order.
So the city issued RFP 2016-18, which was awarded to Michael Baker on April 19th of 2017. So this is for additional construction and design work. So it's for an additional scope of work beyond the original scope that was in the original RFP, about the departments here to discuss the specifics of it.
Why increase the contract? Okay, initially when we started this project, PennDOT was not involved. And so therefore, they're way back when we started working on this project. PennDOT was not involved. We didn't have a PennDOT grant. There was no discussion as far as PennDOT becoming involved. And so therefore, the majority of this would have been done just by Michael Baker International as much as we could. Now that we have a PennDOT grant, PennDOT has additional requirements, and I'm sure Mr. Messner can talk eloquently on what kinds of requirements come to the fore when you're working with a PennDOT grant, but now PennDOT is involved, and so we've got more issues to deal with. In addition, there are rights of way that still need to be considered before we can complete the design process, et cetera. But if this change order goes through, in anticipation perhaps of an additional question, if this change order does go through, we can move on this Greenways trail like almost immediately.
Okay, I'm gonna throw this out for whoever. I see Craig sit back there, and I think he's like the catcher too, just in case anything. Why was PennDOT not involved from the beginning? I mean, why are we getting $114,000 change order? I understand PennDOT's involved now, but why were they not involved from the beginning?
Because we didn't know they were going to give us $1 million grant. So it wasn't, we were doing this all by ourselves. And very, very nicely, PennDOT came through with a $1 million grant. So they weren't involved from the beginning. There was no indication that PennDOT would get involved and assist us.
I guess my question then is, how did PennDOT just come about giving us $1 million? Say, they like Allentown?
One second.
These were original trail projects that we were looking at doing one way or another with the city. There was an overall master plan put in place through the city with different areas to look to do trail projects. So this was something the city was gonna move forward with on it by themselves. They had seen that there were grants available. There are a lot more grants available these days for trail projects, multimodal projects, such as different projects like this. So what they did was they saw that there was a grant available that they'd be able to actually bring it to fruition even quicker. Unfortunately, a lot of times we have money that we're able to go out and do studies, or be able to go out and do some looking at maybe some design. Now it's the fact that with this grant running along here and having to do this change order to implement them along with the project, we're actually gonna be able to do something. You're actually gonna see a final product.
I'll defer to anybody else on council. Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Was this, and I see it's gonna include 0.6 of a mile of paved stone there. Will that be for bicycles or pedestrians or both?
It's going to be for both pedestrians and bicycles. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. Anybody else on council?
Yes,
Mr. Zuko?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know, maybe it's me, but every time there's a project that's done or contracted to the outside, these folks always seem to manage to be able to come back to us underfunded. Here's another case with $114,000. Now, you mentioned about being able to get some grant money, or PennDOT is giving us some grant money. What's the chances of the other $114,000 being a grant from PennDOT, since it appears to me they're requesting this additional work?
I don't know that PennDOT would give us the additional 114,000. The only thing I can advise is because of the additional requirements that PennDOT has us going through, that there is an additional funding requirement. One second. Go ahead, Mr. Rhodes. Go ahead.
I was gonna let you
Go ahead.
This is actually getting paid through a grant. So this is actually partially being paid through DCNR. And then additional funds are being used from CDPV that are being used to pay for this. So the funding's already in place. There's actually grant money being used for this. So it's actually not any city funds that are being used to pay for this.
Okay, so then
So
why,
grant
I'm sorry.
and CDBG.
Okay, so then if the city's not being required to pay any additional money to this, you just said, why are you asking for another $114,000?
You have to transfer the money over.
Right, we have to appropriate the money
Or appropriate, yes.
for the contract in order to pay for the services. I'm confused by, I guess I'm confused by the question.
Well-
State funding for the project has to run through the city. So
Correct.
they won't pay for it. We have to accept the funds, have an agreement for reimbursement, and then we actually have to have this increased on our end of the.
Okay, so then I guess follow-up question, are we getting reimbursed then, the $114,000?
From what he's been saying, that this will be from DCNR and CDBG funding this month, yes.
Yeah, we'll be getting back $250,000.
Fair enough.
Mr. Robinson?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I just want to make sure that we have this straight. We received a $1 million grant from PennDOT for this project, correct?
That's correct.
$114,000 is required in this change order so that we can move forward with the requirements for PennDOT for the grant, correct?
That's correct.
So we're talking about 10.4% of the grant that we received from PennDOT is necessary to receive that $1 million grant, roughly.
Except we already have those additional funds.
No, I understand. What I'm saying though is, we are spending an additional $114,000, which is only 10.4% of the $1 million that we received in a grant from PennDOT. So basically, for that 10.4%, we are getting 89.6% of this grant.
Correct.
That sounds like a deal to me. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Just let me clarify. My concern isn't that. My concern is that we give another $114,000 to a vendor without bidding on it. That's my concern. That's where I come from.
The vendor is already under contract.
He's under contract for $188,000. Now we're gonna give him another $114,000. That's where I have a concern.
Okay.
Just so you understand.
Understood.
Oh,
Mine
no.
wasn't about where the money's coming from with the $1 million.
I absolutely understand, Mr. President. I am as little a fan of change orders as you are, but I think that in this case, it does make sense in the long term.
I think it does too, but I still have a
Yep, that's just.
philosophical problem with change orders. Mr. Green?
I agree. Since this money was probably gonna be used for another project, CDBG money that we get, but we get it for, we allow it for different projects. So now, is there another project that is not gonna be done because we're using the $114,000 for this change order?
Mhm. Any other CDBG monies? That, this is separate. What we have here on this particular project is separate from other CDBG funding that we have for other projects.
Okay, so it's a separate amount that
Correct,
the federal government sent to us.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Anybody else from council?
And this, I'm sorry, this is Jordan Park, you said?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Mullins?
Yes, I was wondering, when are we planning to have any visual aid? Because we talked about this before. We would like to see how the trails are going to be connecting with each other.
I'll be coming back with a separate presentation, talking to you about the various trails, because there's more than one trail we're working on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mullins. Anybody else from council? Anybody from the public? Seeing nobody, Mr. Hammond?
Okay, the change order. Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Henricks,
Yes.
Ms. Moda,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Suzuko,
Yes.
Mr. McLean,
No.
Ms. Zappa.
Yes.
Mr. President, 6 yeas and 1 nay.
Thank you very much. R26, please.
R26 is authorization for another change order.
You don't hire them.
In the amount of $97,000 with Penmar Systems for emergency services related to demolition and remediation of properties. The initial request was for an estimated amount not to exceed $70,000 per contract year. The contract may be extended for 2 additional 1-year terms if the pricing remains firm.
So this change order is at least a little bit more understandable and easy to, to work with. But the city issued bid 2018-05, which was awarded to Penmar on July 18, 2018. The award was for a firm demolition price based on square footage. Since the department is unable to predict the number of homes to be demolished in a year or the size of the homes to be demolished in an anticipated year, the department anticipated on approximately $70,000 in the contract year in demolition costs. However, due to the emergency need to demolish a city property located at 2100 Linden Street, and due to a higher than expected number of residential demolitions for this year, the department is requesting funds for this contract year to cover the increase in cost. But the contractor's cost is remaining the same. He's not asking for any additional price per demo cost. It's just the number of properties to be demoed. There's no way for us to predict that. And so when the department predicted it at the beginning of the year, they estimated approximately 70,000, but the needs just outweighed that estimate. So they're now looking for additional funds to cover those costs. So this is not a vendor asking for additional funds to complete the job. This is just because of the unknown fact of the number of properties to be demoed in a given year.
Okay, any questions from council? Mr. Robbins?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. The 2100 Linden building, what roughly is the percentage of this increase or of the total amount, including the original 70,000, that will be covered just by the demolition of 2100 Linden? Because I know it's a larger building and there's some environmental concerns with it.
We're looking at 74,500 to take that particular building down.
Okay.
That was kind of the event that triggered this.
Right. And then, Mr. Harvey, could you maybe roughly, it doesn't need to be an exact number, but roughly out of the remaining money from the 2100, so when we remove that from the equation, what's left, roughly how many properties would you say this would work with the residential properties? So we're looking at demolition of?
3 or 4,
Okay,
if we run into that.
okay, excellent. And so this is all for work that has not currently been completed, correct?
I hate saying yes and no, but you're correct. We're trying to estimate somewhat for what we have coming down the road.
No, I just wanted to.
It's so hard to predict this.
Absolutely, I just was curious if, I know 2100 Linden has not been demolished yet, I just was making sure that anything that we're adding to this, if it was for something that was already demolished or was not already demolished, that's what I was trying to determine. So, great, thank you very much, Mr. Harvey, thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. 2100 Linden's been talked about for a long time. When did we decide to demolish that?
We went through it in January, and it's deteriorated to the point where it's a liability for the city, not just for the public alone, but also our own employees going through here. 2 weeks ago, the contractor was going through the building and actually fell through the door. Fortunately, he wasn't hurt. It's got that bad where it's a hazard to put our own people in a bad.
No, I understand. It's just, like I said, it's been
No,
it's been discussed for so many years, and it's just why.
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to follow up on that, Mr. President, I apologize for that, but it's something you brought up that I want to deal with. 2100, are we looking at the pole building that's there, is that going to stay or
It's
is?
going to be.
Okay, and the fueling tanks, is that that'll remain? Okay, and then the one question I would just have, Mr. Metzger, this is not something that needs an answer now, but if there is any consideration, since we're freeing up space on that property to look at, especially because it's in a floodplain, doing what we did at the city garage, which is putting the tanks above ground. So, but thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, I apologize for that.
Okay, anybody else from council? Anybody from the public? On R26. Mr. Hanson?
R26, Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Ms. Moda,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Zuko.
Yes.
Mr. McLean,
I'm hesitant, but I'll give a yes on this one.
Ms. Zappa.
Yes.
Mr. Green. Mr. President,
Thank you very much. R27, please.
R27 is an authorization for a contract with the Novak Consulting Group for $124,800 to conduct the management and financial audit of city operations. And there were
Okay, we'll turn it over to the administration.
The city issued RFP 2019-05 for a management and financial audit. An evaluation committee consisted of 5 members and 1 alternate. 4 proposals were received. Firms were evaluated based on ability, technical approach, competence, past performance, personal proposal content, and cost. After a thorough technical and cost evaluation and scoring process, the committee shortlisted down to 3 firms. Oral presentations and interviews occurred with the top 3 firms. The evaluation committee then scored again based on the oral presentations and additional submittal information that was requested by the committee. And Novak Consulting Group scored the highest. And the evaluation committee is recommending award to Novak Consulting Group for the completion of the early intervention program management and financial audit.
Thank you very much. Anybody from council? I know we had some people involved in
Now we can talk a little bit about this.
Rudy?
As you know, we've been trying to do an early intervention program since last year, and we received $120,000 from the federal government. From the state, to do this early intervention program, to look at our finances, look at our audit some of the programs that we have, and so we are actually only putting in less than $30,000 into this, which is really good. She said earlier, we interviewed them and found them to be the right person to do the early intervention program. So I recommend that we accept this unanimously.
Thank you very much. Anybody else from council? Anybody from the public on R27? Mr. Helen?
Mr. England is here, so you shouldn't travel all this way. You should make
I offer silence.
Actually,
You don't mind traveling, not saying anything and traveling back, but if there's anything you want to ask,
Just maybe you can just give a 1-minute synopsis of what you plan to try to do for us?
Absolutely. Again, thank you very much. We are really happy for the opportunity to work with the City of Allentown. The Novak Consulting Group, we're a local government consulting firm. We work exclusively with city and county governments. Those of us in our firm have worked for cities in one capacity or another. I was the budget director for the city of Cincinnati, city manager in another community. Everyone in our firm kind of has
It's 6:58 p.m.
Our first task is really to conduct project kickoff meetings to start to meet with the city's executive team, financial managers, and begin to understand the financial conditions. So that financial analysis piece, financial trend analysis, and financial projections will be the first bucket. From there, we'll decide if an emergency plan is necessary based on my initial review of your finances. That's probably not going to be the case. But from then, we will move into what's termed the management audit portion of the study. We don't like to call it that because audit has a kind of a negative ring to it. We call it an organizational assessment. And our job really is to go into the organization, to each of your operating departments, to identify what's working well, what are those things that you ought to be proud of as a city and your organization. You all are who you are for good reasons. We want to identify those and recognize them. But we also want to talk to the folks who are doing the work day in, day out, to understand what is working well and what needs improvement, so that we can start to craft our analysis, our recommendations for cost saving, for improvement in efficiency, for staffing and resource considerations, so that you all as policymakers can make informed decisions about how to go about generating revenue, what degree revenue ought to be generated, and what opportunities may or may not exist for cost savings within the government. So we'll then integrate that management audit piece with the financial modeling component to provide you all with actionable recommendations, things that you can carry forward and move forward in the next 1, 2, 3, 5 years to start to close the gap in terms of some of the financial challenges you all faced in the past couple of years.
I have a follow-up question. In your management audit, management assessment, organizational assessment, and also in the financial recommendations, will you be able to speak to the public or have some section with the public as well to come to the conclusion of the analysis?
So we've structured the proposal based on the specifications you all have identified. We will typically do that kind of thing. So the project, for example, includes a couple of different sessions. One, toward the end, is really a strategy session with some of the leaders in the government to say, okay, here's what we've found. Here are some things that you all can consider and prioritize going forward. So that would be a facilitated conversation that the public could certainly be present at. We also provide a public presentation toward the end of the process, so when we assemble all of our recommendations, we will come to a council meeting, make a presentation, so there's opportunity for question and answer, and also just a consistent education process as well.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else from council? Anybody from the public? On R27? Mr. Hanlon?
R27, Ms. Moda,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Zuko,
Yes.
Mr. McLean,
Yes.
Ms. Zappa,
Yes.
Mr. Greedy,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks.
Yes.
Mr. President, 78.
Thank you very much. This contract meeting is adjourned. We're going to move right into the council meeting. We're going to have the invocation by Councilperson Zuko, and then the pledge to the flag immediately thereafter.
We gather to make decisions for our community this evening. May we use only our best skills and judgment, keeping ourselves impartial and neutral as we consider the merits and pitfalls of each matter that is placed before us, and always act in accordance with what is best for our community and our fellow citizens. Mr. President.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Hanlon, roll call, please.
Mr. Robinson,
Present.
Mr. Zuko,
President.
Ms. Moda,
Present.
Mr. Hendricks,
Here.
Ms. Zappa. Mr. President, yes, 7 years. Nobody missed.
Nobody missed it. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to move to courtesy of the floor. The rules are printed on the council agenda. You will address us. If you're an individual, you get 3 minutes. If you're representing an organization, you get 5. If, I see we have a pretty large crowd here tonight, so hopefully we have some spokesperson for it. But it's for an item that's not on the agenda tonight. And I would also ask that we keep the side conversations down in the back, because it's gonna, with all these people here, it's easy to get distracted. So, courtesy of the floor.
Good evening, my name is Aziz Wabi. I currently serve as a president to one of the largest Syrian American organizations in Pennsylvania, and I have a few things to say.
Okay, before you get started, the timer doesn't work, the buzzer doesn't work at the end of the timer, so we'll start waiting things.
I want to
Can you have your address also, sir? Your address?
I'm temporary at 510 North Irving Street, in Allentown, 18109.
All right, thanks, go ahead.
Every year, the city of Allentown recognizes all communities who work hard to establish this great city. I don't know if it was working right. Among those communities are the Syrian American community, which is one of the largest and oldest American community in Allentown. On April 17th of each year, the city of Allentown used to hold a recognition ceremony to honor the Syrian community, and the ceremonies were stopped by the corrupted previous mayor, Ed Pulaski. Now, during the mayor's election race, we were promised by Mayor O'Connell to rehold this flag raising ceremonies if he wins the election in front of the city hall, like the city does it to other communities, like the Italian, Greek, Dominicans, Irish, etc. Tonight, I asked the mayor to do whatever he promised in front of hundreds of people and with the presence of many city officials. Tonight, if this promise is not served, I will consider it a part of corruption by leading the people into false promises. I'm looking forward to your approval to hold the recognition ceremony on April 17 to the Syrian community as used to be held every year. I thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else courtesy of the floor?
Yes.
Sir, would you please remove your hat, state your name, and give your address, please?
My name is George A. Kalouf, 536 East Tioga Street, Allentown, Pennsylvania. Mr. Mayor, City Council, thank you to give us this opportunity. I live in Allentown around 50 years. Since I came to America, Mr. Joe Dadona, he started to raise the Syrian flag. And after Mr. Joe Dadona, Frank Fisher, Roy Alphabar, last couple of years, I don't know what happened, why they stopped the raise to Syrian flag. And all I can say, like Aziz said, we are part from American community, and we work hard for this city. And some work in the government, some Syrian work in the government, locally government, like Mr. Alcal and Bethlehem is assistant mayor for Bethlehem mayor. And we have city sheriff, we have police. That means we share in town in their work. And the big question, why they start to raise this beautiful flag, like other community, like you said, Spanish community, Italian community, French community. Yeah. We are part from you guys, and we love you. And personally, I love this guy, Mr. Mayor. Believe me, I love this guy. This guy is terrific. And I know Jared, I work with him. I know this guy, I know this guy, I know Johnny, because I used to be work for City of Allentown for over 20 years. Thank you if you give us back to raise our Syrian flag beside the beautiful American flag. God bless you, God bless America.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Pastor Mufid Kouri. I am the minister of the Arabic community at First Presbyterian Church in Allentown. And all I'm asking for is to be treated like you treat the Greeks, you treat the Italians, you treat every other community by raising their flag. Why are we excluded? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Honorable City Council, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Richard Corey, 1722 Peachtree Circle, Whitehall, Pennsylvania. As the people who spoke before me, I am very interested to know why we are being discriminated against. The Syrian community in Allentown, for those of you who do not know it, is here for over 100 years. In fact, the St. George Orthodox Church has celebrated recently a 100-year anniversary here. We have a population here of approximately 20,000, and We have a lot of young people. I can imagine in the next 10 years, maybe reaching 30,000 through births and in marriage and so forth. We have 20, 30, probably over 30 doctors and dentists serving the community in Allentown, from 0 to now over 30. We are proud to be Syrians, and again, for those of you that do not know it, Syria is the cradle of civilization. The historian, the famous historian, André Perrault, French historian, who was the director of the Louvre Museum in Paris, said, "Every person has two homelands, his own homeland and Syria." That is how important Syria is to the world and to civilization. So again, my question is, why are we being discriminated against? Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, sir. Anybody else, courtesy of the floor?
Good evening. My name is Nidar Yaqub. I'm a dentist in the area here. I'm Syrian American, and we're wondering why we have been discriminated. Raising the flag for the Syrian has nothing to do with the politics. It's a recognition to the Syrian community. We supported the city of Allentown. Actually, we donated canine dogs for the police of Allentown, and a group of Syrians donated the canine dog on behalf of the Syrian community. So we're good citizens, we're being discriminated. All other communities are raising flags. We need to know why we're being denied for so many years. And we need an answer. And I think there is no reason why you do not allow us to do this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Good evening, council. My name is Yamalisa Taveras, and I live at 1932 Virginia Street in Allentown. I am here because I would like to hear from you all. What is the plan for the city to begin addressing the issues with the window guards? We have now lost 2 lives, one very, very recently. We have lost Anelli Rivera and Tamara Arnett, and it's only been within the last few years. I would hate to hear that it happens again. If this is something that can be prevented, whether it is making it a mandate, whether it's finding out, who would be responsible for doing it. But I'm here today. I have a couple of other citizens that are concerned about this issue. So we would like to know if it is possible that the city can make this a mandate for landlords to install. If it's possible that if the issue is financial, that there is some sort of incentive that is provided to the landlords to move forth with this. It is very important to address it. I am the mother of 2 very small children. They're 5 and 3, which are actually the ages of the 2 little girls that we've lost. And I know it's not something that can happen overnight. I know it will take time. I know there will be regulations and legislations that need to be passed and steps that need to be taken. But I don't want to be the next mother to lose a child to, again, something that can be prevented. So if possible, I would love to hear what the council needs or has to say regarding the losses that we have had, the tragedies that have happened, and how we're planning to address this before it happens again. Thank you.
If you stick around after courtesy of the floor, Ms. Moda will be addressing.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Albert Garcia, and I came from what I said for the mayor and the city council. I came to Allentown in 1965. not by marriage, I love this country and we came here. My grandfather was here and he tell us lots about this country. So when I came here, I get drafted right. And I was in Vietnam for 1 year, and home in 1968. So this community is come, from background, and everybody here celebrate First of July. So we are community here. We live in this community. It's a community that is very large here. And you see, we have more than 5 churches, and that's a mosque also. As the churches all Syria. So we like to get recognized in this city here, and hopefully we're the raising the flag on April 17th.
Thank you. Last call for courtesy of the floor.
Glenn Marcus Keller, 2726 Farmer Street, City of Allentown. I have a suggestion for remediating the discrimination and the claims of corruption for tonight. In the United States of America, raise the American flag. Then there's no discussion about any other nations being preferred over any other. There is the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. Joe Clark, Paso Grove, Florida. I have a application pending for building a house. I was here 6 months ago. And what happened was, I was declined after getting approval because it took longer than a year. There's a half a dozen of you people here, and we've already been a half a year waiting for an answer. I pulled permits, I paid architects, I paid engineers, and I simply want to build a house that was originally approved. That's all I want to ask. If anybody has any status report. We'll get that for you, Joe. Thank you.
Okay. You're not going back to Florida anytime soon.
Good evening, I'm Cheryl Johnson Watts. I had a wonderful opportunity to speak before all of you last year, and I mentioned that I felt that Allentown could become a leading city in our global economy. We're a global city. People come from across the world to Allentown and feel very strongly about their heritage, but love this country immensely and want to be a part of the American fiber. We raised so many flags here for so many different origins and heritages. I encourage you to consider the welcoming acknowledgement that this city will have by raising the flag for Syria. Thank you.
No applause, no applause. Thank you very much, Ms. Wilson.
How you doing, Sam Ramos, 1408 West London. We all know that obviously what happened with that little girl, it's hit our community very hard. I don't think anyone here will be short of words on that. I'd just like to encourage all of you, and I'm sure you guys have already made some moves to sit down with property owners and come up with the best solution for property owners and for the community that would meet the concerns of everybody involved. And just like to encourage you guys to strongly pursue that. As far as our Syrian community, I was met by some of the leaders outside and just Again, to repeat what Mr. Corey said, our Syrian community has a history in this city over 100 and easily 120, 150 years. So I think with communities who helped grow this city, I see no problem with acknowledging them. And as last thing I would like to say is, Mr. Hendricks, you know, I live over on 14th from Linden. I've been there now 3 years. We've had upwards of 17 accidents. The last accident crashed into the church on the corner, taking out the ramp that they had for their handicap accessible. That's been sitting messed up for months now. And just the other day, some kids were almost hit on my block, and it's just continuing to be a dangerous corner. So a stop sign, a speed bump, something to slow down traffic coming down Linden Street, because it's getting very dangerous. So I'm a homeowner, I live right there. Last summer, my neighbor said a car went clear across on my side, across my front yard, and pretty much from the corner to probably 3 houses past. So if we could do something about that.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
Hi, good evening. My name is Nasser Sabah, 221 Pennsylvania Avenue, Calasaqua, DA 18032. I'm a Syrian American, been here since 1979. A member of St. George Orthodox Church, a board member. Since the city stopped allowing us raising our flags, we've been raising the flags in different, every year since in our churches and our community clubs. As we say, this is America, we're the melting pot, and we're all communities from different parts of the world. That's what makes America great. Every year, as we raise the Syrian flag, we raise the American flag, and honor the American flag. So this year, please, I would ask you to give us a permission and to let us raise our flag again. And thank you very much. And have a good evening.
Thank you very much. All right, last call for courtesy of the floor.
Responding statement.
Sure.
Okay, we're gonna put this up here. To the Syrian community, it's a beloved community. This is not personal at all, believe me. I know many in the audience. I know many Syrians throughout the Lehigh Valley. I don't know if you remember the late Danny McNeil, okay? He was my cousin. He was my cousin. I respect you tremendously. I respect you tremendously. This is not one bit personal at all. What I'd like to say that, again, I admire and match your enthusiasm for the role that the Syrians have played, not only in Allentown, but the entire Lehigh Valley, and I could stretch that even to the entire state of Pennsylvania. With that being said, the Syrian flag has not been raised in Allentown for at least the last 15 years. The United States of America, for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Department of State, and Department of Justice recognizes Syria as a country to have repeatedly provided support for the acts of international terrorism, precludes me from raising the Syrian flag. And that is my statement. And like I stated, it's not been raised in Allentown for the last 15 years or more. But I do.
Whoa.
I admire you coming out. You made your case to City Council. If City Council wants to weigh in on this, you're more than welcome to do so. But again, that is my statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Okay, we can move on to approval of minutes. Okay, old business, Ms. Mulder.
Can we hear the council?
Excuse me, sir.
Concern?
Pardon me?
Can we hear the council's attitude towards this?
No.
No?
No, the council's not gonna. Courtesy of the floor is for people to give us what their concerns are.
And then you do not discuss it, or?
Council, it's not under council's purview. No, we're not gonna discuss it. No, I'm sorry, but it's not under our purview. No.
To thank my my colleagues, Mayor O'Connell, Leonard Leitner, and the Solicitor Office for working on the window guard legislation with me. I've been working in the background in development of this legislation for the past several weeks, asking our city clerk to research window bars in apartment rental buildings. We gathered some information from New York City and information forwarded to us by the fire chief relating to the fire code. This was forwarded to the solicitor office last week to request to draft legislation. I have reviewed this information and also have reached out to my constituency, seeking their thoughts and input into my plan to create legislation that protects Allentown's most valuable assets, our youth. For this evening meeting, I have asked several constituents to come up to the mic as they did and share their thoughts. Personally, I want to thank Yamelisa Tavera. She just came up. She put a lot of posts on Facebook, asking council members, that, the importance of, doing something about it. I also spent a few hours talking to the mother who lost the child, a few weeks ago, and I've been in contact with her and also the family. They have collected over 400 signatures, and they would like some laws to pass in the state level. So we're gonna be helping her out with that. As I introduce new legislation, I ask that my peers on council to support this initiative and listen to our constituents. It takes us all to work in harmony as we place systems and practices in place that protects our residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Moda, and I'm sure you will have overwhelming support from the council.
Thanks.
Okay, communications. We have a presentation by Aaron Desenachak.
Could I leave information? Good evening, Mayor O'Connell, City Council, and residents of Allentown. My name is Erin Desenachak. I'm a partnership specialist with the U.S. Census Bureau. There's two reasons I decided it was very important for me to work for the U.S. Census Bureau. One, filling out the census is a civic duty for everyone. There's 3 civic duties: filling out the census, jury duty, and voting. Second, as a 20-year resident of Allentown, it's very important to see as many essential services come to Allentown and funding. What many may not be aware of, council is aware, but what many residents may not be aware of, every essential service in the city, from schools to roads, to block grants, to community centers, to youth programs, social service programs such as CHIP, WIC, SNAP, all those services for the city, they're all tied into funding that comes through census participation. And what many residents might not know is that for each resident from 0 to 110 years old that resides in Allentown and Lehigh County for that matter, $2,093 comes back to Allentown. So if you do the math, $2,093 for everyone 0 to 110 times 10 years and times the number of undercount of residents that were not counted in 2010 census, which is approximately 30,000 or 30% of the population. That's 628 million that was lost for essential services for Allentown. So it's critically important that as many members.
Wait a minute, let me do it. Can we please have quiet in the back? Sorry, but if you want to talk, just step outside so she has the courtesy of the floor right now. Thank you.
Thank you. There are many that don't see that don't see. Many have said, well, why does the census matter? Well, that's a lot of money. That's $628 million that could come back to Allentown for so many services and needs to improve the quality of life here for all residents, no matter where someone is from. It's everyone who resides in the city. So how can you help? I left information. It could be as small as getting involved. My card is on the information that people can come up and take. It could be as small as putting information on your website, your social media, have your organizations get involved with us, invite us out to speaking engagements, parades, festivals, get the word out, telling others about census jobs that are available next year. Census takers will only come out if you don't fill out the information. The information will only be 10 to 11 questions next year. Everyone that resides in the city will receive a postcard. So it takes about 10 minutes to go online. If you don't have internet, it'll be available to fill out over the phone, as well as in 59 languages with a paper. But I also want to say that it's, besides being critically important for funding, it's completely safe and confidential. None of the responses will be reported to ICE, immigration, the courts, welfare, any organization. All census employees, myself, administration, management, down to census takers, all take a lifetime oath of confidentiality. We're purely a statistical, apolitical agency that is dedicated to bringing the funding that's so critically needed, especially in Allentown, as you all know. Another way that's critically important that you can get involved, and I hope council, as well as important leaders and trusted voices in the community would consider, form a complete count committee. This is a committee that would meet to discuss strategies of how to bring the word about, how important the census is, dispel fears, and let everyone know in our great community how important it is to fill out this short questionnaire that's going to impact so many lives and improve Allentown. I look forward to working with all of you and everyone in the community, and thank you for inviting me out this evening.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President.
Mr. Robinson.
Thank you. Just very quickly, Mr. McMahon, if it would be possible, not just to have that information put on our website, but if we can also consider over the course of the next year to include that in both English and Spanish in the Adventure Allentown guides, and also any type of publication that we put out that it would be appropriate to put it in. And if we can ask all of the Crime Watch groups that we print their newsletters for to please include that in their newsletters for the next year. That would be my request to the administration. And also, I would be more than happy to work on a committee for a complete count. And I would ask my colleagues if they would be willing to, that specifically Ms. Moda and Mr. Greedy, because I think that it's exceptionally important that our Hispanic community gets counted appropriately. So I would be happy to work with all of my colleagues, but specifically Mr. Greedy and Ms. Moda, if they would be willing to work on such a thing with me.
Definitely.
Sure, if I may. I actually met with Ms. This afternoon at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce or the Valley meeting, and I invited Ismael Arcelay, who's in charge of the census here in the city. In 2000, I was in co-chair of the census committee for Allentown with, what was his name? Not the councilman.
Marty?
No, he was a Republican. Tom Burke. With Tom Burke. And the good thing, it was fun to do, first of all, because we were all throughout the communities. But in addition to that, at that time, we were betting out who was going to be the third largest city in the state, and we were competing with Erie and the city of Erie, and we actually won. At that time, we got 206, they had, I think, 203. So we beat them at that time. So it's actually fun. I'm definitely involved. I brought the people from Philadelphia today and from Hazleton, they are involved. And we definitely needed, in addition to the $2,093 per person that we get, it's also used for redistricting. And as you know, we lost a congressman, I think a couple of years ago, 10 years ago actually, because there are the municipalities that had more people than we did. And they go by how many people we have, and that's how they redistrict the municipalities. So it is very important. I certainly will join the 3C committee and work with you and anybody else. And for you, if you go on our website in the city, you'll get information from a lot of events that we have going throughout the city as well. Okay, just allentownpa.gov. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Reedy. Mr. Flores.
Yeah, thank you, and you can always count on me. I'm also involved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else from council? Anybody want to add something from the public? No, we'll move on. Seeing nobody, okay. Number 2 in communications, the parking authority notice pursuant to legislation just approved. Council received a letter from the parking authority on March 27th, 2019. That is noted below. And it is noted as Allentown Parking Authority's initial report to City Council pursuant to City Ordinance 533.17. This report notification is being provided to the City Council 30 days in advance of any rate change as required by Allentown City Ordinance Section 533.17. Beginning May 1, 2019, on dates when there are no events at the PPL Center, enforcement of metered parking for Hamilton, Linden, Walnut, and Walnut Streets between 4th and 12th Streets and the unit blocks between Linden and Walnut Streets will end at 5 p.m. Sundays will remain free unless there is an event at the PPL Center. The rationale for the adjustment is to support downtown retail businesses and offer free parking to the residents of the city of Allentown, their guests and visitors to the city. The important part about that is when there are no events at the arena.
Mr. President, I just have a question on that, and it's maybe something that Ms. Off or Mr. Hendricks could answer. When the kiosks are installed, will there be a similar memo talking about the start times of the new rates and also the start times of enforcement on event nights?
You're talking about a memo to you?
Well, a memo to council similar to this. So this just addresses the free parking, which is excellent, but I'm saying when the kiosks are installed and the new parking begins, will there be another memo stipulating the start times for both the rates and the fines?
Pursuant to the ordinance.
I wasn't sure if this was.
No, this is just special.
That's what I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, this was just, it'll take a while for the kiosks and
Right.
so on to go in, so we wanted to be able to have the, especially for the spring and summer, to get this out as early as we can, even though the parking meters.
Absolutely. I just wanted to ask that question because I was asked by a resident who looked over the agenda. I received a message earlier today asking, is this the only one or will there be another one that states the start times of that? So that was the question.
I'm a little confused, Mr. Robin. The kiosk won't make any difference in the start times or anything.
No, but I'm talking about on event nights. What time during the day that the new rates will start? Because as we discussed during the bill, if there's a hockey game at 7 o'clock at night, you're not going to charge for the third hour, say the $6 an hour at 9 o'clock in the morning.
No.
So that's what I'm saying, the start time of when the increased rates will occur for the third hour, and the start time as to when the $10 or the $24 ticket will be in effect as opposed to the regular $10. That's what I meant.
We can make sure that's up there, because I was gonna say, we have some kiosks now.
Right, and that's simply what I meant when those new rates started for midnights. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll make sure that it is.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Reed, you want to say something?
Yeah, just quickly, not in regards to this issue with the parking authority, but in regards to something that came up last night at a meeting that I went to, for the parking authority, and that is a property on 500 block of, maybe it's 600 block of, 500 block of, and a property on 500 block of 7th Street. And there's, apparently somebody's saying that they're going to put a parking lot there and acquiring some properties. The owners or the renters for the property asked me if I can bring this to council because somebody came into their property and started offering them money to move. There's there's a health clinic there. And apparently they went over to the parking authority and they said, no, we don't own the property. And then somebody else said that yes, they own the property, so they're confused. And that has to be cleared up. And I'm not sure there is a plan from the parking authority to build a parking lot there or not, but it's creating a lot of problems. There were about 30 people last night at an event that I was invited to, and they were talking about it. It's very concerning because they don't know what to do.
So these people, I don't know.
They have a clinic in there, and they see about 2,000 people. They say about they say they have about around 1,500 to 2,000 clients right now, and they're being asked to move.
Asked to move to make a parking lot?
That's what they said, yes. And somebody came in that was supposedly being, it was a broker lady who came in and said that she was sent on behalf of the parking authority to ask them, and offer them money to move. So I don't know if that's not true. I mean, I request that.
I'm not aware of that, and I can only say I wasn't at the last meeting. I was out of the city in Washington. I don't know if Candy would have to add to that.
No, I think when and if it does happen, we'll certainly give enough time for people to know.
I would think so, yeah. It's gonna take time to do that process if they're doing it.
They have a 10-year lease in the property now, and apparently the person who they leased it from is saying that he haven't sold the property to anybody, but the broker came in and said that the parking authority owns the property.
It's easy enough to check. You can check it with the county, with the deeds. So,
That's what I recommended to them.
yeah. I would doubt that the parking authority would have it
Is it health center?
at this point, yeah.
Is that what you're saying? They own the health center?
Okay, Miss Oda.
What I would like to know is, have, the colleges, L-Tracy have reached out to you guys, about the parking and the students?
I received some text messages, some emails rather. I think that the appropriate thing for them to do might be to sit down with the parking authority and see if there's something they can work out for their students in one of the decks. Because the biggest problem is now the lot behind, right behind the Donnelly building is now being torn up for construction.
I think that it will be really good if, you know, if they can come up with some kind of like flyers or something, letting the student know about this new change, in meters, you know? I mean, many of them drive. So I think it is really important because, I mean, getting a ticket, and many of them go to night classes.
Are you talking about the free parking after 5?
No, she's talking about.
Night
I
and day,
received a
they go
couple
to
of
school.
Emails too, of students, adult students who attend classes at
Yeah.
L-Tri-C. And there's some of their classes last after 9 o'clock in the evening. There used to be a parking lot right behind it. I think it's more the parking lot with the construction than it is the meters, although they were referencing the meters, and these came when the ordinance came through.
The students, they should be aware because there's gonna be problems.
I think maybe the college and the parking authority can get together and come out with some amicable solution for that.
I'll certainly pass that message along.
Thank you.
Authority and see.
That would be good.
It is reasonable. I think there's something we can work out for students, for sure. Okay. Reports from committee. Budget and Finance, Mr. Garidi.
There was a committee meeting this evening, and we discussed the December 3 finance report and also the February finance report. And we have a bill that will be discussed later, presented to the city, to the council.
Thank you very much. Community and Economic Development, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Community Economic Development Committee met last Wednesday, March 27th, and we forwarded 2 bills favorably that are on tonight's agenda. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Human Resources Administration and Appointments, Ms. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee met this evening. There are no future meetings scheduled. We did have a bill that's going to be passed favorably to full body council.
Thank you very much. Parks and Recreation, Ms. Moda.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has not met since the last council meeting. There are no future meetings scheduled.
Thank you very much. Public Safety, Mr. Hendricks.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has not met since last meeting, and no current meetings are presently planned.
Thank you very much. Public Works, Mr. Zuko.
Thank you, Mr. President. Committee has not met since last council meeting, and there are no future meetings scheduled at this time.
Rules, Chambers, Intergovernmental Relations and Strategy, that's me. I'd like to just say ditto, but I will say the committee has not met since the last meeting, and there are no future meetings are scheduled at this time. Now we go to our favorite, the Controller's Report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday I didn't have any reports to give, and I was deathly afraid that would disappoint you. But this morning, my audit manager said, "Oh, I have these 2 done." Hallelujah, here we are.
Now, there's a new invention called the telephone.
I have a P card review for the month of February. This one just came out today. P cards, in my opinion, and are working pretty well. We reviewed 39 statements for almost $41,000. We had 3 invoices where an incorrect expense account was used. Journal entries were done to correct them. And we had 1 or 2 documents that did not have doc numbers on them. Doc numbers is how you can trace the documents, and that will be corrected in the future. I also have the Accounts Weekly check review for the 1st of March through the 29th of March. We reviewed 423 checks for almost $3.8 million, and we reviewed 14 wires for a little bit less than $1 million. We found a number of duplicate payments. We identified 2 checks for duplicate payments of $15,350 and $71,056.37. The $15,000 check represented an invoice listing. It was actually the 3rd payment on a 2-payment schedule. And additionally, there was $84.50 listed as past due. There was $169 in there that represented a premium on another piece of equipment, and the $6 for an installation payment fee. We weren't aware about the additional premium because we did not receive a copy of the contract that listed that additional piece of equipment. We have since gotten it. The $71,056.37 duplicate payment was a duplicate of an invoice that had been approved 10 days previous. Both invoices were paid on the same check. After verification from the department, the check for $15,000 was voided. And additionally, after verification from the department, the invoice for $71,000 was also voided and reissued in the correct amount. I say we look at every check that crosses our desk, we look at every check that crosses the desk. We had another check that came through. It was made out to an incorrect payee. This took a little bit of research, and we determined that the name on the contract, and this was a grant contract, was not the same as the payee. The department is working to correct that. We also noticed, and this will be dealt with at some point in the future, that the receipts do not line up with the approved work narrative, i.e. the group is asking for reimbursement for work that was not in the original grant narrative. And that will also need to be worked out in the future. That check is currently being held. We have 3 invoices that were charged to an incorrect expense account. Once again, journal entries will be made and the checks are released. We had a number of checks, 22, that were paid late for a variety of reasons. None of these invoices incurred late fees. The department's revised. We got explanations in all cases. And that, sir, are the highlights of my report.
the highlight of my too.
I am glad to do my little bit to make your life a little bit brighter.
Administration report.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. It was pretty short, Mr. Manager. We thank you for that. No formal report, but if you look over to the press table, you see two people there tonight. Emily Opilo, who has been covering the media for about, 6 years? 5, 6 years? Will be moving on to a new position in the morning call. And I just personally, when I was on city council, now as the mayor of Allentown, I want to thank her for the coverage, the fair coverage she has always given us. And I wish her well in her new position. And beside her is Andrew Wagaman, is that correct? He's going to be covering the City Hall beat right now, so we say farewell to Emily, even though she's not going anywhere. She's still doing a call. We welcome Andrew, so fair and balanced reporting. Thank you. That's my report.
I was gonna applaud her, but I was afraid she'd think it was because we're glad she's leaving.
Oh.
That's not the case at all. I agree.
No applauding.
She's been very fair to us, and I thought she's done a great job. I know and I'm sure my colleagues are gonna miss her reporting.
I echo that. Good luck to you, and we're gonna miss you. And welcome, sir. We played golf together, right? Okay.
Ditto from here. Your new assignment wouldn't be investigating the mayor, would it?
Her new assignment is an investigative reporting, but I don't think she's going to start with the mayor. We have other places where she can start.
Yeah, okay. Okay, we have some appointments, Ms. Appa.
Yes, we do, Mr. President. For the reappointment to the Ethics Board, Attorney Robert E. Donatelli. His term will go up to 2021. Do I have any comments from my colleagues on Mr. Donatelli's appointment to the, reappointment to the Ethics Board? Seeing none, anybody from the audience would like to speak on his behalf? All right, seeing none, Mr.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
Mr. Donatelli has done an outstanding job on the Ethics Board for many, many years, and I'm glad you have chosen to reappoint Mr. Donatelli. A fine individual, an excellent lawyer, and a great person.
Okay. Can we have a vote?
Mr. Donatelli, Ms. Zappa?
Yes.
Mr. Greedy?
Yes.
Hendricks?
Yes.
Ms. Moda?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Zuko?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Is Mr. Donatelli?
He is here, yes.
He is here, would you? Good evening, sir. Congratulations.
Thank you very much for your vote of confidence. I appreciate my service to the Board of Ethics, and I look forward to serving again, hopefully not many hearings in the future. But I have enjoyed it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it very much.
We appreciate it, too. Thank you.
Thank you for your sacrifice.
Next, we have another reappointment. This is to the Planning Commission, Robert Button. His term will go to 2022. Do I have, did I see, what did I say? Robert Richard. I'm sorry, Richard. Usually it's the last name, and I'm messing up the first name, that's impossible. That was for you, Emily, for your last name. Thank you. Can I have any comments from my colleagues on this appointment? Mr. Zuko?
Yes, I know this gentleman for a very long time, former neighbor, and an excellent individual as well, so excellent citizen.
Anyone else? Anyone from the public, Mr. Graham?
Yeah, again, I echo the same sentiments of Dick. I've known Dick for a long time. A true Allentonian, cares so much about Allentown. He's been on the Allentown Planning Commission for a long, long time, does an excellent job. And obviously, I fully support Dick in his reappointment. Good person.
Can I call for a vote, Mr. Hanlon?
Okay, for the appointment, Mr. Button, Mr. Greedy?
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Ms. Moda?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Zuko?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Ms. Zappa?
Yes. I'm gonna call you Dick. You gotta mess up your first name.
It's okay, that's all right, you're not the first. Hey, thank you very much, I appreciate the reappointment, I appreciate your confidence in me, and I appreciate the kind words that you said. I really enjoy being on the planning commission, it's great fun for me, I know a lot about the city, I've learned a lot about the city. And I particularly like it because I'm kind of the amateur on the board. Everyone else has a finger in development, I'm just representing the public. I'm just a normal guy, regular guy, and I enjoy being able to play that role. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. All right, we have a Disruptive Conduct Board of Appeals. We have a few of them here. I'll go with first Deborah L. Held, and her term will end in 2021. Do I have any comments from my colleagues on the Disruptive Conduct? Deborah Held.
I would just say that I know her very well, and she's an outstanding citizen and very appropriate for this board. Serves a great purpose.
Okay, anyone else? Any comments from the public on Deborah Held? Seeing none. Mr. Hanlon?
Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Ms. Moda?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Zuko?
Yes.
McLean?
Yes.
Zappa?
Yes.
Mr. Grady?
Yes.
There's 7 yeas.
All right, is Deborah here?
Yeah, sure. Just wanna come up.
You want to step up here?
I'd just like to say thank you for the appointment, and hopefully I will serve on the board well.
Okay, thank you. All right, this is also for Disruptive Conduct Board of Appeals, Ricardo Ortiz. His term will be up in 2020. Do I have any comments about Mr. Ortiz? My comments?
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks?
I want to state that I know Ricky. I grew up with him on the south side of Allentown. He's a lifelong resident of the city, very respectful, and he lives less than a block from where he grew up. Great family, his entire family lived here. I know his entire family, his brothers, and my age went to the same school I did. So I know he'll do an excellent job serving on this board.
All right, anything from the public?
Ken Robinson, 721 West Cumberland Street. I also know Rick Cortez for many years, and as a landlord, I know he'll do an excellent job serving on the Disruptive Conduct.
Thank you, I thank you for your service. You'll be working with myself and Everybody. That's it, I'm sorry. We're both on the board of Disruptive Conduct Board. We've both been on for, I think, you were actually one of the architects of this law, weren't you?
Tom Burke was the primary architect. I helped along with several others on the Indian Prime Watch Treaty.
I have to say, I think I've been on this board for several years now, and maybe 10, before I was even on council. And I think this is one of the most important laws. This is a tool for all citizens who felt that they could not do anything about the disruptive that lived. Now, these are all renters, so we can't do anything, homeowners. But I encourage everyone, if you're having a problem, to use this law. When you call the police department, make sure you tell them you'd like to have a DCR, because after 3, in 1 year, if they get 3, the landlords must file to have them removed. So this law truly does work, and it's, welcome to the board, it's very interesting, and I'm hoping that this law stays, because it's an important one. And that's my report, and that's my comment. Pardon me? Okay, did I ask? No, I'm sorry. Are you here, Ricardo? Come on up. We did vote. I'm sorry. We haven't voted yet. You're not in yet. I just went off on that whole disruptive conduct thing. That's what I was doing. All right.
Okay, Mr. Ortiz, Ms. Moda?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Zuko?
Yes.
McLean?
Yes.
Zappa?
Yes.
Mr. Grady?
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
All right. Now. I passed everything. You were in before we voted on it.
I would like to thank council for selecting me. Been a resident here my whole life. I have a passion. I work here in Allentown, and I think I can make a difference. Thank you very much for selecting me. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, congratulations. Now, I'm done.
Okay, ordinances for final passage. Bill number 13, please, Mr. Hanlon.
Okay, Bill 13 amends the risk fund budget by transferring $218,812.70 to cover legal fees and negative balances in permanent wages and health insurance.
All right, administration. Oh, this was in Human Resources Committee, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Bill 13.
Bill 13, yes, this was moved favorably to council, or voting on this tonight? Oh, Mr. Hamlin?
Correct. We're not there yet, for the vote.
I'm asking for a vote.
No, you don't ask for a vote yet. We just wanted to get your input on the bill. Anything else from the administration?
No.
No? Anything from any other member of council? Anything from the public? No, go ahead.
Mr. Robinson. Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Mr. Zuko.
Yes.
Mr. McLean.
Yes.
Ms. Zappa.
Yes.
Mr. Greedy.
Yes.
Ms. Hendricks.
Yes.
Ms. Martin.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Bill 23, please.
Bill 23. Bill 23 amends the general fund, the risk fund, the solid waste fund, the equipment fund, the Drexler fund, E911 fund, and the 2019 stormwater fund by appropriating funds from the unappropriated balances for the rollover of encumbrances from the prior year. This one needs an
Mr. Greedy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was in our committee, Budget and Finance, we discussed it tonight, and we all agreed that we should move it forward favorably to full council. Unanimously.
Okay, when's the appropriate time for the amendment, Mr. Hanlon?
right now.
That's what I thought.
Can we read the amendment?
Would you please?
Okay, so the amendment would add to the table, police equipment, and the account would be 083028003000271, and it would include 4 items. The first item was, the 4 items are 4,000, 50,000, 87,000, 100,000. The total amendment to the 83 account would be 241, 324, 92. And then this would be in the city council's budget, would be a rollover for the EIP program, would be $30,000. And the new total for section 1 of the ordinance would be 961,940.78, and the equipment fund would be 579,249.
Okay. Any comments or questions from council? Any comments, questions from the public? Seeing nobody, Mr. Hanlon on the amendment?
On the amendment, Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Mr. Zuko.
Yes.
Mr. McLean.
Yes.
Ms. Zappa.
Yes.
Mr. Greedy.
Yes.
Ms. Hendricks.
Yes.
Ms. Moda.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Now we can go back to the bill itself. Any comments, questions from members of the council? Comments, questions from the public? Seeing none, on the bill as amended.
On the bill as amended, Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Mr. Zuko.
Yes.
Mr. McLean.
Stormwater funds in there, I'm a no.
Ms. Zappa.
Yes.
Mr. Greedy.
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks.
Yes.
Ms. Moda.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Bill number 24, please.
Bill number 24, amends Title 11 Authorities, Boards and Commissions by adding Article 172, Small Business Advisory Board. The purpose of the board is to advise the mayor, council, and the chief of the small business.
Okay. And
can take care of that, Mr. President, because Mr. Hanlon and I talked about this. There's several amendments that developed from the committee hearing, from both some cleanup of the language and also for some recommendations from Councilman Garidi. So I can read these several amendments into the record. Section 172.01, purpose. At the end of that statement, the section, while the board will work directly with the senior business development specialist, they will have the authority and power to work with all departments and city council to address any issues that could affect small business in the city, has been struck. In 172.02, establishment and composition, a sentence was added at the end of the second section, which will read, on the initial appointments, 2 members shall serve for 4 years, 2 for 3 years, 2 for 2 years, and 1 member for 1 year. In the next section, a portion was eliminated that would say, or a designee of the Director of Community and Development and approved by council. The following section, the word must was added after members of the board. And actually, I'll read what was eliminated first, that'll make more sense then. Eliminated was do not need to be residents of Allentown, but need to have. What was added was members of the board must own and operate a small business within the city. Members do not need to be residents of the city of Allentown. A definition of small business was added as the next portion. For the purposes of this article, small business is defined as a person, sole proprietorship, partnership, corporation, association, or other business entity which employs fewer than 25 employees. In the next section, this was added at the request of Councilman Garidi. It was an oversight. It was to include this. The board must contain members from the east side, south side, center city, and west end of the city as to be determined by council in the approval process. The next section added at the request of Mr. Garidi, council and the mayor shall make every effort to ensure the board reflects the cultural diversity of the city. The next section discussing meetings, it will state that all meetings shall be advertised and open to the public. The board shall develop and approve their bylaws, which shall be approved by council by resolution. The board shall serve as an advisory body. It shall be tasked with offering suggestions on the following. I'm just going to read the entire section here. It just makes more sense that way. Identifying issues of concern to small businesses. It shall research, discuss, and propose solutions to the concerns it identifies. The board shall provide these recommendations to Allentown City Council and the administration on a regular basis, at least annually, as part of the annual report and presentation. See below section 177.05. Identifying potential inefficiencies with ordinances, regulations, and the permit process as relates to small business. The board may provide suggestions for improving efficiencies. Consider and opine on the impact of small business of potential city actions when council or the administration requests such input. Examples of such items such as construction projects, parking practices, fees, signage, and zoning changes, and make recommendations to council and administration. Those were the amendments that I am going to introduce, Mr. President, and I would ask for a second on those, please.
So, second.
Seconded by Mr. Grady. Now, there's one other amendment. Should we put that in right away, Mr. Hanlon, and then we can discuss the amendments, correct?
I would think each amendment has to be voted on separately, would it not, Mr. Wood?
Yeah, this is the easy one.
Right, this as a whole amendment, and then the other one is as another amendment that we have to
I was
do.
gonna say, because there was a lot of lines.
Right. Not each individual in that sense, Mr.
Any
President.
discussion on the amendments, the initial amendments, by council? Any discussion from the public? Seeing none, Mr. Hanlon?
Okay, on the easy amendments, Mr. Zupo.
I did ask for public comment, nobody came up.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
On the amendments, yes.
Mr. McLean.
Yes.
Ms. Zappa.
Yes.
Mr. Greedy.
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks.
Yes.
Ms. Fodor.
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
President, 78 unanimous.
you very much. Now, we have another amendment. Want me to just read it?
I think you need a first and a second.
How can I second it if they didn't hear what it is?
It's a side of the Here is the amendment looking for a proposer and a seconder. And this thing would say that under 172.02, establishment and composition, it would say the mayor, with the approval of city council, shall appoint members of the Small Business Advisory Board. The board shall consist of 7 members, and then it'll delete the Small Business Advisory Board shall consist of 7 members, 4 of whom shall be appointed by council and 3 by the mayor. That's deleted, and then that final sentence will be kept in that says the mayor shall appoint the chairperson of the board with the.
Okay, well, I'll make that the amendment. Motion for that amendment. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Zuko. Okay, discussion on the amendment.
Mr. President, so first and foremost, the intention of having council be responsible for picking the majority of the board is that this body, prior to my taking office and for a few months afterwards, dealt with a very serious problem, which was that the previous administration saw fit to not staff certain boards so that work would not be conducted. This was specifically related to the redevelopment authority, and then money was able to be transferred to other needs because without a board, there's no ability to conduct business, which meant that the money, while budgeted for that, could be rated and used for other things to balance the budget. Now, this is obviously not a board that would have purview over money. However, this is something that I feel is an exceptionally important advisory board for the department, for council, and for the administration as a whole. And I think that it would be inadvisable to allow something like this to fall into a potential problem with the future administration. I have no doubt that Mayor O'Connell, for as long as his tenure will last, will not do that. One of his first priorities when he took office was to fill as many of the boards and commissions as possible to make sure that they could all be working as quickly as possible. However, it's not just our responsibility to worry about the current administration, the current council, it's our responsibility to establish policies and procedures that will well outlive all of us. So that was the intent initially. Also, it would provide a better ability for council to be more directly involved in the operations of this board on a regular basis, because if we have responsibility for picking the majority of its members, we will by nature become more involved with that. Also, there is precedent for appointments of this nature, whether it be boards created by the state, such as the Historic Architectural Review Board, that we have our local board, I should say, and the Environmental Advisory Council, which was created 10 or 11 years ago, which has several appointments made by city council. So there is precedent for this from both boards created by the state and boards created locally. I understand the concern of the solicitor's office in their memo that was delivered to council. However, I don't agree with the interpretation of the relevant section of the charter, and that section is 309B, which states, all members of boards, authorities, and commissions over which he has the power to appoint, the majority of council shall be necessary for confirmation, except where otherwise provided by state statute. Now, the relevant portion of this section, in my opinion, is the section after the second comma in the first sentence, over which he has the power to appoint. This sentence by the framers of the charter could have easily said, all members of boards, authorities, and commissions. No questions, all members. It does not. It stipulates over which he has the power to appoint. A plain textual reading of that second part of the sentence would suggest that whether it be by the state or whether it be by this body, that boards can be created, and at the moment of their creation, it can be determined who has the appointment power. So I do not agree with the solicitor's office's contention that the sole authority rests with the mayor. as I said, there is precedent from both the state and local, and also I believe that the interpretation of this provision is incorrect, and that the correct interpretation is that anything that is created can establish the power of that. I would also state that from the solicitor's memo, just two sections that I think is relevant to respond to is, on page 3, there is a sentence that states, two sentences that state, the January memo noted the same conclusion we suggested in our March 1st, 2019 email, which is that the mayor has sole power to appoint. That the HRC gives the mayor alone the appointment authority subject to approval by council. In our March 1st email, we noted we would welcome legal authority that suggested otherwise to our conclusion. As of today, we have not received any such authority. Well, unfortunately, as we all know, this body does not have the ability to seek our own legal advice without there being a necessary vote first, and we would have to establish that it's contrary to the interests of the administration. This is a law that has not even been put on the books yet, so that would not be an appropriate use of our funds or our resources to do such a thing. I would also say that in the near the end of the memo, end of this section, on page 4, it was stated that, right here, we note that we do not weigh in on whether this apparent limitation of the HRC that we're discussing is wise or if there may be a better approach. We only note that the procedure set forth in the HRC is itself legal. We also note the recent issue in Allentown history in which the appointment authority was not, appointing authority was not naming appointments for the boards. The result of this was several boards were understaffed and fell into disuse. The process suggested in the ordinance may be a good means for guarding against board understaffing and disuse. Additionally, we note the appointment procedure in the proposed ordinance is similar to the appointment procedure established by the General Assembly for members of the Advocacy Council. Earlier in the memo, it was stated that the state has its own council that was established, and this is following in that footstep. In particular, the Advocacy Council members are selected by the governor and senior members of the state Senate and House of Representatives. Here, the proposed legislation arguably tracks the wisdom of the General Assembly. Nonetheless, it is not our place to interpret away the most reasonable reading of the language of the HRC. I do not doubt that the Solicitor's Office feels that they are interpreting the Human Relations Commission, the Home Rule Charter appropriately. I would, however, argue that because of past practice, because of the ambiguous language in the charter, which is not direct, and even when you go back to a later section which specifically relates to the boards and commissions changing with the new charter, which is section 1205, it does not, and I'm happy to read that into the record if necessary, but if not, it does not directly stipulate that those boards will change. It stipulates and states in one sentence that vacancies in the membership of such boards and commissions shall be filled in accordance with this charter. Well, again, when you go back and read section 309B, and it says, over which he has the power to appoint, my interpretation of this section is that we can establish a different appointment procedure for a new board, or a new commission, or a new authority. There is precedent to state such, and I would ask my colleagues to not support this amendment, because this is a step towards trying to establish a more balanced relationship, which this body already took in the establishment of the Environmental Advisory Council almost 11 years ago. A more balanced approach towards staffing these boards of importance between this body and the administration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. Anybody else from council?
I'd like to hear the interpretation of
Mr. Chairman, may I be heard?
Absolutely.
We stand upon the reasoning in our memo, all of which you've been provided a copy of. I'm not gonna reiterate the reasoning of each of the bullet points in the memo with you at the risk of disclosing attorney-client privileged information. So we would stand on our memo. Actually, 3 memos. There was one in January 2018 with regard to the redevelopment authority. There was an email March 1st of this year asking for comment, as Councilman Robinson pointed out, and then our memo March 27th, which was last week, detailing all our reasoning on this. The majority of which were housekeeping items in the First Amendment, but the bulk of the reasoning was on the powers of the mayor under the Home Rule Charter, as we interpret it, to be the appointing authority with advice and consent of the council.
That being the bottom line. I certainly understand and respect your argument, Mr. Robinson. My position is, we pay the solicitors to do this. They didn't just throw a dart at it, so. Anything else from council?
Mr. President, just in accordance with the rules that any member can speak twice on an issue, I just would like to respond to that and state that, yes, you're absolutely right, they are paid to do this, but however, this is a legal opinion, this is not a legally binding statement. This is something where they are giving us their legal interpretation. We do not have to follow that interpretation. I would argue that there are times repeatedly where this body can choose to do that differently. I just wanted to make that plain and understood, that it's not a statement of absolute fact, it's an opinion based off of what our solicitor's office believes is the appropriate interpretation. And unfortunately, since this body does not have its own solicitor, it's not able for us to get a second opinion on an issue like this, which is why I'm going to be introducing a charter amendment in the next few weeks to allow us to have our own solicitor.
Thank you very much. Anybody else from council? Anybody from the public on the amendment? Mr. Hanlon, we're gonna take a vote on the amendment, but just so we're all clear. A yes.
On the amendment, and what the amendment would do would be to have the mayor, the appointing council, appointing the members of the small business advisory board. So under the amendment, the mayor would appoint and council would approve.
So just so everybody's clear, a yes vote would be yes for the amendment, and a no vote would be against the amendment. Yes. Okay.
On the amendment, Mr. Zuko,
Yes.
Mr. McLean,
Yes.
Ms. Appa,
No.
Mr. Greedy,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Ms. Mona,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
No.
Mr. President, I have 5 yeas and 2 nays. Passes.
Okay, now we vote on Bill 24 itself as amended. Oh, sorry, public. Anybody from the public want to talk on Bill 24 as amended? Anybody know what we're talking about up there? Just joking. Okay, no comment from the public, we can move on to us. Did I ask, wait a minute, I didn't ask council. Okay, sorry.
Mr. Zuko,
Yes.
Mr. McLean,
Yes.
Ms. Appa,
No.
Ms. Greedy,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Ms. Mona,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
We have 6 yeas and 1 nay.
Thank you very much. Bill 25, please.
Bill 25. Bill 25, amending the general fund budget by supplemental appropriation of $22,000 from Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission to hire professional historic preservation consultant to complete a historic preservation plan.
Mr. Robinson, this was in your committee, forwarded favorably?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. President. This was forwarded favorably unanimously, and I would just state that this is an excellent thing, and I would thank Mr. Leitner's staff, and specifically Mr. Kimmerly, for working towards achieving this grant. And I can also state that I received information from several concerned parties in the historic preservation community, especially from our historic districts who were included in an initial meeting on this, and they are very excited as to the work that the department is doing and what this study will result in for the city. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody else from the council?
Just a quick question. So this would allow whomever we hire to do everything in the city or the historic department?
It would actually be the entire city.
Yeah.
Right, not just the historic districts or historic properties in the city as we know them, but actually every property in the city, correct, Mr. Kimmerly?
Yes, that's correct. It would be not so much that any specific programs will come from this, but suggestions for specific programs on a citywide basis. This is not just in the 3 hard regulated districts. This is citywide wide, and it's open to anything and everything, possibly that could be on the table. Historic preservation tax credits, National Register nominations, historic resources survey, nominating and regulating new districts, that would be regulated by HARB, et cetera. So it's very comprehensive and broad.
Even properties that are not owned by the city but are in the city.
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody else from council? Anybody from the public on Bill 25, please? Seeing nobody, Mr. Himmel?
Mr. McLean.
Yes.
Ms. Adcock. Yes. Mr. Greedy.
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks.
Yes.
Ms. Moda.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Mr. Zupa.
Yes.
Thank you very much. R28, please.
R28, authorizing submission of an application to the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources for a grant of $250,000 for the Millennium Park project.
Okay. Here you are.
Yes, I'm
Ms.
here.
Elchar, would you give us a brief synopsis on it?
Right, so we are moving forward with a Millennium project. We have the ability to also file a grant to help offset some of the cost of the Millennium project and allow us. The $250,000 is a DCNR, requires a match. The match we have from CDBG that is confirmed, so we have the funding we need for Millennium Park. This also allows us then to move forward with some other projects. Receipt of this grant.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions from council?
So when are you planning to start with it?
Millennium Park project is already in process. We have the RFP out for construction document, design and construction documents. It's been issued.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Robinson?
Could you just, thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Elcher, could you just discuss what the scope of work would be if this grant was achieved? What additional work would be done on the park?
In the Millennium Park?
Yes.
The scope of work encompasses input that came from the community. So it is upgrading the basketball courts, upgrading the lighting, creating some green spaces as well, addressing stormwater issues, planting trees.
What I was just trying to gather is, I know what the department is going to do with the $90,000 that is being spent from CDBG money this year. I'm just curious, would this then encompass all of the other suggestions?
That's
So this
correct.
would then complete the park if we would receive this grant, or would there still be more work to do?
There
with
would
the system?
still be more work to do.
Okay. I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out, is what will this complete, what will be left to do then?
So of the $90,000 that we'd already received thus far, I mean, we put in a new playground, we bought new
Right.
playground equipment, so that's all part of it as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms.
But I was
President.
trying to say, when will this be done? Like, when will this be?
My goal is to have this done next year,
That's what okay.
because it will take that long to get it through the process and get the construction going, et cetera.
Thank you.
Thank you. Will the whole park be closed during this construction, or will it be done in phases?
As far as I know, the whole park would be closed.
And the community had a lot of input in the process. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and all of those suggestions are included in the bid, or in the RFP process.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from council? Anybody from the public?
Milagros Canales, 509 West 2nd Street. As a member of the community that actively uses Millennium Park, we had a lot of input with the park department in regards to what we wanted to see from the park. You know, we do Cox Meat Block in Millennium Park. We would like to be able to have some usage of the park, maybe like the construction to be done in phases, because that is the only park, if you notice, in that area that they have access to. The next nearest park would be the Fifth Street Park, which is the old fairground park, which, if you haven't seen my morning walks and videos, it is the second worst park in the city besides Millennium. Currently, that park is being used as a drug den. We have a homeless city, being put up there. There's more needles than anywhere that I'm cleaning up. The park is missing walls. My mulch is, I don't know how many years old. It is a terrible looking park. I don't currently use it anymore. And I walk this from 3 to 5. You're welcome to come out and see it. It is not a welcoming park anymore. I clean it. I live right down the block because you don't have a house on Allen and I live on True. And I think that while Millennia is now getting, finally, I don't know how many years it's been that we've been complaining about Millennia, Old Fairground Park, which is between Gordon and Liberty, I would ask you, everyone in City Council, anyone in this room, to take a walk with me and see it for yourself. I took Leonard on a walk, he'll tell you, Captain Granite tonight, we suggested a light that I'm willing to pay for. More than enough. You know me, I don't complain too much, but this is a second little pocket water park that the city uses, that nobody, it's a little treasure, and it's become the worst nightmare for my community. So I implore you, if you could, come and take a walk with me and just see what I see. And thank you for Millennium Park, I'm looking forward to it. If we can do it in phases, at least the basketball court to be open for the young men, that way we have an outlet for them, because there's no other park for them to walk to. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you for your comment.
I think we should take that under consideration.
I've got an affirmative nod.
Mhm.
Okay, anybody else for R28? See nobody, Mr. Hanlon.
Okay, on the grant application, Ms. Appa.
Yeah.
Mr. Guidi.
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks.
Yes.
Ms. Moda.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Mr. Zupa.
Yes.
Mr. McLean.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett, 7 yeas, 2 abstentions.
Thank you very much. We have Bill 20 on ordinance for introduction. Bill 26, please, Mr. Hanlon.
Bill 26, amends Article 301, pawnbrokers, secondhand dealers, and precious metal dealers, eliminating the thumbprint requirement, creating a mechanism for a secondhand dealer to seek exemption from the electronic recording requirements, and identifying specific data that participating businesses must collect and submit to the police department.
All right, that's gonna go to you, Mr. Hendricks, in public safety, but any comments from
Thank you, Mr. President.
from council? No? That's gonna be at the public safety meeting. Any comments from the public? Seeing none. Mr. Hanlon, resolutions for introduction, we have none. Any new business? Anybody, new business? No? Good welfare? How about an adjournment?
Yes.